Hey, welcome to another episode of Exploring Cognitive Biases with me, Duncan from Mind Affinity. Today, I'm talking about the testing effect. It's a very, very simple one, and this will be a very, very short video probably. So the testing effect is all about how we learn and how we remember information. And there have been various studies that show and support this in a number of different ways. So basically, put simply, you are far better able to remember and recall information in the future if, when you're learning that information, you're also tested on that information. Okay? Now, there's a whole variety of ways that you can utilize this and test yourself on information. But if you try and do all of your learning and revision by simply reading through the textbooks over and over, you won't be able to recall as much information when later tested as you would be if you test as you go along, if part of the learning process includes active recall. So there's a few ways you can do this. Tests are obviously a good way. This is why if you're developing an e-learning course, for example, something you want to consider is making sure that you've got, if it's broken down into sections, a little mini quiz at the end of each section. Now, the quiz, the person doesn't need to get 100% on the quiz, but what it'll do is it'll help identify any gaps in their knowledge and understanding so that they know what to focus on to go back to. And this is the same for you if you're learning. But also knowing that the test is coming up will improve recall in itself, and then the act of performing the test will enhance the ability to retain that information and recall it at a later date as well. Another really simple way that you can utilize the testing effect for yourself is when you're learning something new, write it down rather than just reading it. The act of writing it, you're forcing yourself to recall the information in that moment, and that helps it embed better into your long-term memory. This is why doing cue cards so if you're revising, writing down questions and answers on the front and back of cards to test yourself on is a really good way of learning, because the process of creating those cards is really helpful, and then looking through them is testing yourself, so that's really helpful, but it also helps identify where your weak points are in your learning. And as a side note, if you're doing that, if you're revising for a test, a mistake that a lot of people make, a really common mistake when revising what in theory they already know, is that they make their cue cards to go through, or their list of topics or whatever, and they work through them and they go through everything. The thing is, a good percentage of that stuff you already know and you've committed to memory and you're happy with that. And yet so often people spend time going back over the stuff they do already know. So if you're going to make cue cards and use them to revise and to check your understanding, then do that, but make separate piles. So you've got one big pile that's got them all in, go through them all. Any that you get right, put in one pile. Any that you get wrong or you're not sure about, put them in a second pile. Then the second pile, the ones you weren't sure about, you go through that twice as often, if not more, than you revisit the pile that you were confident with. So you go through that second pile and again split that into the ones you've got now and the ones you still haven't. And then you go back through the ones you still haven't. And you keep doing that until you've got none that you haven't got. And then you go back to the smallest pile, or the most recent pile rather, and work through that again, working your way back up to the big pile. This way you're better able to utilize your time more efficiently when you're revising and looking back over that information. So that's it really. Nice simple one for today, the testing effect. There's lots of evidence that supports and shows that when we're learning something, we're far better able to absorb that information and commit it into our long-term memory if during the process we are tested or testing ourselves as we go along. That's it. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Great to have you here today. Nice quick short one for you. I look forward to catching you again same time next week with another cognitive bias video. Thanks for tuning in. Take care.